So today we're going to learn how to use some basic tools and how I'm going to make this chair look a little bit nicer than it does right now. Now, I was able to pick up this lovely hand decorated piece of embroidery. So what happened was somebody took a piece of widely woven fabric, heavy duty, and then each of these, in order to do upholstery, has to be individually hand sewn. This was very popular for ladies to work on and then recover their chairs. Each one of these little pieces here has been hand stitched. So it's sort of like cross stitch, and this does take quite a bit of time. I was excited to buy this. I think I paid maybe $5 or something like this for a piece that was all hand done at a local antique store. So I'm excited to give this a new home. I don't know who made it and I don't know why they made it, but it has never been used. So that is what is going to replace this old ugly seat cover. Now, the tools that I have here today, first off, very important. What do you do when you lose the partner to your sock and you've looked everywhere and you've waited and waited for that sock to show back up? You give it a new purpose and it becomes a cleaning rag. So this is what I'll first start out with, just to get all the dust and everything off. Next up, I have a furniture repair system. I don't need to fill any holes, but I could use the fill-in stick if I wanted. However, what I am excited to use is I have a couple dings here and there on the wood, and I want it to all have this nice dark color. So I'm going to be able to use my furniture stain marker, and that's what I can use to touch up any marks that are no longer beautiful and dark and matching the color of the stain. Next up, I have a couple different screwdrivers here that I'm going to end up using. This one is fabulous because I can use it as a really nice long lever. So the simple machine here is a lever where I can transfer my downward energy into lifting something upward. And I'm going to use this to take out the old staples. You'll notice it has a flat head on it in the shape of a plus sign, or sorry, subtraction sign. So I think standard subtraction minus sign, and that's how I remember this as a standard screwdriver, because it has standard subtraction minus sign. The other kind is a Phillips head. Phillips starting with a P, and it has a little plus sign shape. So I think of Phillips starts with P, just like the word plus. So that's how you can keep track which one is the cross Phillips head and which one is the flat standard head. So standard subtraction plus Phillips. Now, I'll need those two different screwdrivers for my different screw heads. I discovered that part of the reason this seat wasn't staying where it should was it had lost 3 out of its 4 screws. So there was only one poor little screw trying to do all of the work. So I just went through my collection of odds and ends, and this here's just a drywall screw. So that will work just fine for this particular application here. The important part is looking at the length. If I make it too short, it won't be able to reach up and grab the seat. But if I make it too long, it will actually come all the way through the seat, and then it will poke the seat of whoever sits on the seat, and that won't be very pleasant. So I need to have all 4 of my spots filled up for that to work. And one of my favorite tools that we're going to be using today is just a handy-dandy heavy-duty stapler. Now, these do take special staples, so you want to make sure that you have the correct dimensions. They come in different measurements, both standard and metric. And so if you are going to be using a 3/8 inch or a 10 millimeter measurement, you have to make sure they match. Because if they don't match, number one, it won't work. And number 2, you could end up destroying your materials. So it's important that you pay attention to how these work. because they don't load exactly like a regular household paper office supply kind of stapler. This one, in fact, even tells you, it reads on the side, do not load staples here. If you don't know how to use it and you can't find your user manual, you can almost always look up the manufacturing number and just Google it. So, highly recommend you always should keep the user's manuals for every material you have, even if it's not a super fancy tool, because sometimes you forget how they go together. This one in particular, I load the staples prong side up, laying down. Then this little guy pushes all the way in and it clicks. So now I know that this is ready to use. These staples are pretty heavy duty, so I want to make sure that I am treating this with respect and being careful. Number one, with any job that you are doing that involves tools, no matter how big or small or how fancy the tools, always treat them with respect. So what exactly am I doing here? Well, first thing, this doesn't look very nice. There's some old marker here. There's a few stains where it looks like somebody set something wet on top of it, and it's just gotten kind of dingy over the years. This is not the original seat cover, and you can see on the back where this one was just stapled over on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a moment to clean and prepare my chair so that I make sure everything is nice and neat and I don't have any areas where the wood is damaged or actually broken. And this is where I get to start using my markers. This is seriously just one of the most fun little tools you can get yourself. And I think once you own them, you find reasons to use them. So I'm going to be using a mahogany color stain pen. And right here, I have a little white mark. And now I don't. It's amazing. Anywhere where you have damage to the original finish or stain, you can mark on over it. Now, if you have large areas to fix, you are going to want to use an all-over stain or another product. But this is really good for when you're just dealing with some of the dings and scrapes that show up on your furniture over time. And they're very simple to use. It's just like using a regular marker. So I'm going to start by just cleaning up my chair. This part here I don't really need to marker because it's going to be covered by the pad, but it is a nice place for me to demonstrate and just to make sure that I'm trying to color match my stain as well as I can. And I'm seeing that this particular one is just a little bit too red. So this gives me a chance to test and to change my mind because I do have some in here that are a little bit more on the brown side and a little less on the red. So it looks like walnut might be a slightly better option for me. And when I use it over here, it does look like it will match a whole lot better. So that is my first step, is simply making sure that the wooden part is ready. I'm also going to put just a little bit of furniture oil on it, a little bit of Danish oil there, so that it will be fresh and it will make the wood happy. You got to feed your wood sometime. So we will come back when I have the wood all ready to use. Next up, I almost feel like I should be a paid spokesperson for Danish oil. This stuff is amazing. Do you have anything out of wood in your home? Well, then you should have Danish oil. Seriously, this stuff is fantastic. Now, I usually just get it in natural. If you have a whole lot of furniture that's all the same, and especially if it's something special like a really dark stain or something like that, you could always purchase that, but I think natural is the easiest. So I'm just going to open this up, put a little bit on my oil rag, and it will look like a whole new chair. It's quite amazing stuff. bonus is you can put this over an existing finish and an existing stain. Now you do have to make sure it's real wood. If it just has kind of that wrap of almost like plasticky looking stuff that looks like wood, this won't work. It does have to be actual solid wood on the furniture. Otherwise, you'll just be kind of oil that sits on top. But even if that happens, you can just wipe it off and it shouldn't harm anything. Now, this will be a little bit smelly, so you need to make sure that you're doing this in a well-ventilated area. For example, I'll be opening the window. All right, so that is going to set aside so that the oil can soak in, and that way it will be ready when I'm done with the upholstering piece. Now, it does make your hands a little greasy and everything, so make sure that you wash and you start with clean hands. Now, this part here is the original piece that I have just taken off. Now, I'm not sure if this is the original piece that that chair came with. This seat may have been replaced at some point, but I do know that this fabric on top was added over an old vinyl covering. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take this fabric off because I want to be able to start with a nice, fresh, smooth surface. And if I just added my new fabric on top of the old fabric, I'm likely to get rumples and it won't be quite as symmetrical and even. So I'm just using my standard screwdriver. Remember, standard subtraction, it makes a little minus sign. And this is how I'm using it as a lever. So I push down, then it will come up and it will transfer my down pressure to an up pressure. And that way I can pull out these old nails quite easily. Now, I am making sure that I put them in a consistent place because I do not want to end up with a stray one that I find at 4 in the morning by stepping on it. So always make sure that you keep track of all the things that you are adding to and removing from the fabric. So I will go ahead and continue this. All right, this is the exciting part. I get to see what the underseat covering looks like. Oh, nice. A bit of old, kind of cheap brown vinyl. It definitely has seen some better days. It's got some rips and tears, but it has been nicely attached down and it has a padding underneath it. So I'm going to leave this on here because it will help keep the padding in place. And it does offer a pretty nice base cover so that all I have to do is worry about getting my top cover looking pretty and I don't have to worry about trying to keep the base in place. All right, let's see what's up next. So in order to upholster things so that they look nice, the most important thing is to really take your time stretching and placing. Now I know that this wider part of the trapezoid is what comes out towards the front of the chair. So that is where I'm going to start because that is also where you're going to see the majority of the part that falls to the front. So I've decided that the way I like the look of this, there is a bit of a blue bow here. So I'm going to have the bow looking like it's coming towards the front of the chair, like it's tied and it hangs down towards the front. Now, this piece is not fully square. If you look at it here, you can see that it is not a square. It is just a regular, well, it's not even a rhombus really. It's a quadrilateral, has no 90-degree anything on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be trying to find a nice distance to center between the front and the back. And that is where I'm going to focus it first. And then I'm going to try to find a nice even distance from side to side. So once I get a good position for where I'm going to start stretching the fabric, I am going to put in just one or two very simple, quick and easy placements, just so that I can begin doing the hard and fast attachments. So I think I might have the back where I want it compared to the front, and it looks pretty symmetrical. So I'm just going to put in one, oops, I missed the edge there a little bit. I'm just going to put in one staple. And I'm going to take out the other one that I accidentally got on the very edge of the fabric, but not quite on it. So now that I have this one to hold it in the back, I'm going to go directly straight across, and I'm going to very gently pull the fabric towards the front, just across from where that particular staple is. I don't want to get too aggressive trying to pull it on all the other sides because there's really nothing to hold it there, and I could end up damaging my fabric. Now I want it to be as even as possible. So I'm going to really take my time with this to make sure that it is as centered as I can get an old piece of fabric that isn't square onto an old chair bottom that also isn't square. All right, so fortunately, with a nearly symmetrical but not quite symmetrical design, it's a little more forgiving when you don't have it exactly in the middle, but I think I got it as close to the center as I can. Now, in order to get these corners down, I'm going to do a very tight job of folding them as best I can. I'm going to start by pulling them straight forward and hope to get a nice little corner tuck that will be exactly the same on all the corners. The more they are the same and the more I can make them nice and crisp, the better this upholstery job is going to look. And here we have our beautifully recovered chair seat. It's important to make sure that you have no loose ends. More staples than necessary is probably too few. So I might even take a minute to put in a few more staples just to make sure that the fabric is pegged in as many places as possible. If you don't use enough, what can happen to your fabric is as people use this and move it, it can start to create stress points in your fabric where eventually they're going to end up with holes and they might even tear out completely. So I want to put in lots of staples so that it will disperse the stress on the fabric so that I have many, many points to share the burden instead of just one or two that's going to end up creating holes. So all I have left to do is just make sure that this is as neatly finished as possible, and then I can attach it to the rest of my chair frame. And here we have the finished product, a fabulously recovered chair that has been given a little bit of love on the wooden parts and also has a more historically authentic seat cover. So what used to be vinyl with some old yucky fabric that was stained and dingy looking, now I was able to find something at an antique store that had never actually gotten to be used, and now it gets to be used. Granted, it's a seat cover, but it will look lovely in my workroom.